Hey there, my name is Jared, and this is my Jared Talk. Today I'd like to talk about fear, what it is, how it works, and why it seems more than ever we are living in a scarier and scarier world. Um, Fear is one of the main ways that we modify human behavior, and it is one of the main ways that we can turn a profit. And I am concerned that the further we go down this slippery slope, the worse off society will be. So let's begin. What is fear? Fear is a universal emotion that reacts to or creates threats. Threats referring to pain, danger, or missed opportunity. Fear is something that I feel. It is something that I cause others to feel. Fear is something that you feel, and it is also something that you cause others to feel. Now, I've been thinking about it recently, and I've come up with this sort of spectrum of fear. And if you can think of any others, please feel free to comment. But the most glaring fear to me is imminent fear, being attacked by a bear, being chased, perhaps getting a cancer diagnosis or a terminal disease and having to make a decision based on that urgency. The next type of fear is cost benefit or scenario analysis. This involves measuring risk from a variety of alternatives and determining basically the investment amount per outcome, as well as what the return on that investment might be. To put it simply, I have a problem with efficiency. I often find myself in the efficiency trap. If I don't multitask enough, if I don't make the absolute best use of my time and energy, I will hate myself. I will feel like if I am not improving, that I am dying. And that if I am not using those resources to the best of my ability, or if I miss out on potential resources, I will hate myself. And part of that is an underlying fear that I am not good enough, and that the only way for me to be good enough is to chase this insatiable limit that really doesn't exist. The next type of fear would be something called FOMO, or fear of missing out. If a movie premiere says, or a movie trailer says, only in theaters this Friday, that creates a level of urgency and a sense of your life will be more complete if you prioritize going and seeing that film. Similarly, let's look at Taylor Swift tickets or concert tickets in general. Because Taylor Swift is an artist that is in high demand, whenever she releases tickets, the Ticketmaster queue will be through the roof. So many young people will be using their parents' Amex cards to, go to the concert that will complete their life. Or let's think about other consumer trends such as Furbies or Labubus, if I miss out on that exclusive opportunity. Finally, we have things like Bitcoin or crypto, where if I miss out on the opportunity for these resources, I'm going to feel like I missed out on the boat. I'm going to miss out on my chance to get financial freedom or resources that would potentially change my life forever. And these are all part of this phenomenon called FOMO. Next, we have procrastination. This is something that I have felt in academics. Anytime I had to write a paper, I never really enjoyed doing that because writing always kind of created this pain that I wanted to avoid. This dread, this anxiety that I'm not really that, either I'm not great at it or it feels like it's not the best use of my time because it feels like I'm digging up some sort of pain. This is also why people probably procrastinate on things like doing their taxes, why they file an extension or wait till the last possible day. It scares them. It creates an anxiety. Why do people put off mowing the lawn? I don't want to get sweaty and push that heavy lawnmower all around. Or why I let the dishes stack up. It's this procrastination which has an underlying fear foundation. The next sort of fear is a little less insidious, but is also quite novel. And this involves some level of fun fear. And we can look at these as skydiving, horror movies, suspense, roller coasters, these things that sort of excite us and create some sort of risk that we are internalizing, but is also so fun, right? It's like it's this thing that we all sort of experience at points in our life. Um, Finally, we have second nature fear. And second nature fear is something that you might not think about because it's something that is so ingrained in your life, something that is so automatic. An example might be getting in a car and the first thing you do is putting on your seatbelt. I put on the seatbelt to minimize my risk of getting into a car accident because I am afraid of that outcome if I was to get in a car accident. Um, it could save my life, for instance, or minimize my risk of injury. Another one would be first thing I do when I get home, I open the door and I lock the door behind me. This reduces the risk of a potential home invasion, or so maybe the liability of just leaving a door open where anyone could potentially walk in. And these second natures are sort of, we are indoctrinated in some of them, and some of them just become so ingrained in our life and so automatic that we don't really think about the underlying fear. But every time we do it, we are sort of fanning the flame of that sort of fear. I'd like to present an analogy I've been working on, that fire is fear. Now, when I was a boy and as a young teenager, I was a part of this program called Royal Rangers. And Royal Rangers was like a Christianized Boy Scout program. You kind of did the same thing that the Boy Scouts did. You went on camping trips, you learned how to start a fire, and you made some s'mores, and hopefully you didn't get touched down there. Just being real, right? You ever think about it in the shower? Was I? You're not alone. So anyway, we learned that the three components to starting a fire and maintaining a fire are oxygen, heat, and fuel. Oxygen is air. Without air, fire can't become, and if I take a flame and I put like an empty bowl or bucket on top of the fire, it will dissipate because it has no oxygen to continue burning. The next component is heat. We think of that as a flame, a spark. In certain primitive situations, this can be thought of as more of like creating friction, where the friction will create this spark, and that is the impetus to a fire. Finally, we have fuel. And the term that we were kind of taught as kids was this term called kindling. And kindling kind of refers to the least dense sort of forest materials that you can forage. These include things like pine needles, small branches, things of that sort that you sort of collect. And whenever the spark meets those materials, it produces a flame. For instance, if I take a lighter and I walk up to a log and I start just lighting the log, it won't burn because the log is too dense. We have to start with a small material before we can then add logs to our fire in order for it to grow. If we remove any of these three components, the flame dissipates and dies. And let me explain maybe an analogy comparing fire to fear. In the same way, we need influence, urgency, and anxiety in order to create fear or to make other people feel fear. The influence is sort of like air. It's all around us. We're all seeing people chase our attention or get us to buy something or convince us to vote a particular way. These sort of influences are all around us, and it's hard to sort of separate what is real and what someone just wants you to do for their own personal self-interest. It's insatiable, sort of like air. It's all around us. The next component would be something called urgency. And this is like, if I am being chased by a bear, I'm going to run faster. Okay. If I touch a hot stove, I am going to pull my hand quickly because there is an urgency to remove myself from that pain. If my house is burning, I am going to run as quickly as I can out of there to avoid potential danger. All right, the final component of fear is anxiety. Most people might get anxiety from a fear of heights, maybe roller coasters, being claustrophobic. But also people can get things as far as if you've ever been in a car accident and you see someone driving recklessly behind you, you might clench your steering wheel tighter. You will be almost triggered to have a level of anxiety that relates back to a previous pain. And so by squeezing tighter, you are alleviating that anxiety. So similar to fire, where it requires this triad, this trio of influence and necessity, we have fear that also requires these three things. And if we remove any of the three, we can prevent fear. And if we can remove any of the three later on, we can remove fear. So this gives us to the fire-fear conundrum. Fire is the only way to keep us warm, but it is also the only way to burn our house down. Similar to fear, fear is the most effective way to control others, but it is also the most effective way others control us. It's a double-edged sword. It is the slave and the enslaver. And for those who subscribe to the teachings of Jesus, for instance, one of the last things Jesus says before he is crucified is, those who use the sword will die by the sword. And I think similarly, we can sort of take that to mean those who use fear will die by fear. Because that is really the only reason why people yield a sword in the first place. They are afraid. So let's think about how do we put out a fire, and how can we put out fear? If a fire is small enough, we might just throw some water on it. We might grab our fire extinguisher and read the directions real quick because we forgot or we never knew how to use it, and we will, spray that sucker down. If the fire is too big, we will call 911. Hopefully a fire truck can be there quickly and save the day. And finally, if a fire is so large, for instance, like the Pacific Palisades in California, or like a forest fire where it's too large to control with human resources, for instance, we have to isolate the perimeter and let it burn. We have to let it run out of fuel, let it basically turn to soot and ash so that it has nothing else to burn. Let's think about how we could put out fear in the same way. Like the fire extinguisher, most of our fears like FOMO, for instance, or imminent fear, like say a cancer diagnosis, the solution is consumption. I'm going to buy those Taylor Swift tickets. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to invest in crypto. I'm going to get chemotherapy. That's going to sort of extinguish my fear, right? If the fear is bigger than that, outside of something just in my immediate control, I will ask for help. I will lean on family and friends. I will reach out to maybe a therapist, a counselor, someone I can trust, and maybe they can sort of help me share the weight of that, but also maybe repivot my perspective and help me zoom out so that I can best understand that maybe the fire isn't as hot as it feels. And maybe it can be somewhat irrational, maybe, and help me just deal through it, and heal through it, right? Finally, if the fear is so large, what I think many people do, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is I will self-isolate and I will let it burn. And what that usually means is that will yield depression and anxiety. And we will suffer in silence. We will usually look to addictions. We will look to food, beverages, substances, sex, porn, all these different things that sort of make us our coping mechanisms for the underlying depression that we have or the anxiety that we have, where the anxiety is actually tied to an underlying fear base. So this brings the question, if I tell you it's a safe world out there, what and how much will you buy, right? When I think of whenever I'm having a good day and I feel like I have no worries and I'm like, okay, I live in a safe environment, I have all my needs met, I'm making the best use of my time and resources, and I'm not bogged down by other people's maybe troubles, and I'm having a good day. What do I like to do? It's not even really buying anything. I like just going to the park, maybe reading a book, getting some fresh air, maybe checking in with someone I haven't talked to in a while. I don't really buy much if everything is good. Alternatively, if I tell you it's a dangerous world out there, what and how much will you buy? And if I tell you it's a dangerous world out there, if you're subscribing to the news, if you think it's very fearful outside and you're scared, what will you do? you will try to defend yourself. You will buy a gun, maybe. You will buy a webcam, maybe not a webcam, maybe like a Ring camera. You will buy a dash cam. You will do these things as contingencies to basically alleviate the anxiety that we have, that we're doing the best that we can with our resources to protect ourselves, because fear is all around us and it is being injected into our veins. How is it being injected into our veins? One of probably the biggest changes to the human landscape has been CNN, or cable news network, aka chaotic nonstop noise. CNN was the world's first 24-hour television news network, and it started in 1980. It basically bred an entirely new sort of entertainment and an entirely new resource that people have become addicted to because it helps them feel better about their life. And not feel better about their own life, it makes them feel like they're more informed about the dangerous world around them, where you'll typically see people are very much addicted to the news. This is more of a religious practice than any religion, is this keeping up with current events, keeping up with the fears that exist. And it really leverages FOMO, where it's like, if I don't watch it every day, I'm missing out on resources that can inform my life, that can increase my odds of survivability. And it's not just, for instance, CNN. CNN has leveraged multiple competitors and created a new landscape and a new economy. Fox News, MSNBC, NPR, several independent news channels, either on YouTube or on the internet. And there's just a plethora of news everywhere around you. Your time is valuable, and the news is trying to get your attention, your urgent attention. So let's think about something else for a second. And one of the things that has happened over the last 100 years is that the world population has quadrupled. Since 1927 to 2024, we can see that we've gone from 2 billion to 8 billion people. Incredible exponential growth, and probably the largest growth that humanity will ever see on the earth. In comparison, the United States has doubled its population over the past 65 years. If you were born around 1960, or you are in the boomer generation, that means you have seen the population double in your lifetime, the US population. In 1960, the population was around 170 million. Today, it's about 340 million. And what does that really mean is that this creates a unique bias for us whenever the news is sort of compounded here. Remember, the news is developed in 1980. In 1960, boomers are born around there. Once they hit 20 years old, once they hit early adulthood, they are now injected with this new form of fear and fear mongering. Now let's see how these two relate between population growth and news coverage. Because the population has doubled, is it not fair to assume that total crime naturally increases as population increases? If the number of cars increases on the road, doesn't traffic increase? These things to me seem like they are positively related. As one goes up, the other goes up. And then that leads to the question, though, why does it feel like the world is getting scarier? And my sort of deduction here and explanation for this is that with twice the population, we have essentially twice the crime. And with twice the crime, we have twice the news headlines. We have doubled our number of stories. But the issue is that the number of time in the day has not changed. The finite time that we have is limited to 24 hours in a day. So we hear more severe stories of fear than ever before. We hear more gruesome stories of murder. If the number of murders is doubled, you will hear about the more gruesome one than all of them. But the bias here is that over the past 45 years since the 24-hour news cycle began, it has created this unique bias where it seems like the world is getting scarier. But it's like the population has just doubled or quadrupled in ways where it has created more crime in general. But the reporters are incented to highlight the most gruesome ones to control you, to get you to steer you in a direction that they are incented to. Again, if a bear is chasing you, you will run faster. What happens if you are being chased by a bear every time you check your phone? You check social media, you check the news, you get reminded on the, you're listening to AM radio while you're driving, you're listening to podcasts, you're listening to things that are influencing your mindset, your behavior, and what you buy. And this deduction leads us to say that if you are afraid, you are easier to control. So much so that in order for you to survive, you will use fear too to control others. Economics does not trickle down as well as fear does. And that's sort of the predicament that we are in today, is that fear is an incredible motivator, but it can also become one that is perverse whenever it is combined with profit and control for selfish intentions. That leads us to, let's think about profit motives and what are the two ways that you can profit the most. Profit can be increased in two ways. We either increase the top line, we either sell more, or we decrease our expenses or increase the amount of productivity out of our existing workforce. We either add efficiency to it. So we're either raising our top line, or we are minimizing or lowering the expenses that counter out the top line so we can maximize the profit. So in this case, in order to maximize revenue, companies will typically increase FOMO among the consumer base. So I will say, you need this more than ever. And in order to do that, the things that really light kind of light a fire under people is to create urgency. A bear is chasing you. You need this now. It's coming in the theater this Friday. Tickets only on Thursday, and then they'll sell out, as they always do. So we increase FOMO on the consumer base. Next, though, to counteract and to minimize expenses, we maximize workforce productivity. We increase imminent fear among our workforce. Many people who work in America and many like labor markets and things like that, your jobs are becoming obsolete. You are becoming obsolete. Your jobs are becoming replaced by AI. Your job is being outsourced if you work in customer service or manufacturing or in all these different industries. You are already outsourced to begin with. But the thing is that before we outsource you, managers will typically try to extract more profit. And how do they do this? We have to squeeze the lemon tighter to get more juice. And how do we do this? If you don't meet the new quota, there will be disciplinary action. And if there's disciplinary action, that can lead to you losing your job. And if I'm the CEO, that's always a tough choice for me to make. I don't want to see anyone lose their job, but I really don't want to see me lose my job. So I have to maximize the profit that we are making and hopefully increase it so that I can prove to the board that I am worthy not to lose my cushy job, And so the whole thing is in order for me to convince others about my effectiveness as a leader, I have to convince you that if you don't do what I say, you will lose your job. You will lose your ability to generate resources for you and your family. Why were those involved in chattel slavery, why were the slaves beaten? Why were they whipped? For control, to create fear that if they didn't generate more value for their slave owners, that they would be beaten. And maybe even that might lead to death. So we see this thing here where even though chattel slavery doesn't exist in America as it has had a long history of existing, we have to understand that a lot of these forces are still at play. We still incorporate fear as much as we can legally get away with in order to maximize employee value. And the threat of losing one's job or losing an employee's threat of losing their resources is an imminent fear that employers use. So if you see a company that creates a lot of profit, ask yourself, are they increasing FOMO among consumer base? And are they increasing imminent fear among their workforce? These are the two biggest ways to maximize profit. And so that's all it is. If you see a company giving dividends, they are using these things. They are incorporating these things to more and more sophisticated areas that people don't really think about. So this is something I've been thinking about is fear incorporates 3 C's. So with the 3 C's of fear, fear wants to maximize itself as a commodity to best control behavior in order to maximize the exchange of currency. A commodity is like a raw material, something like water, wood, coffee beans, cotton, things that are raw goods that we sort of extract. You can think of it like oil too. We extract from the natural world and we sort of stockpile it and concentrate it to create goods. In this case, fear is a commodity as well. It seems that there is no ceiling to the amount of fear that we can feel. It's sad to think about. Imagine people who are being tortured, or people who are being waterboarded, or people in solitary confinement. These people are being, the level of fear they are feeling is every day increasing. And it seems like it is a commodity that has no ceiling. So in society today, we are increasing the amount of fear that we are making other people feel, because it is a great control mechanism. It's used to control your behavior to get whatever the fear monger wants you to do. What is the incentive for them? What money can be made? What way can I get you to vote or lead you to influence your decisions? And finally, why is that? Is to increase the exchange of currency. The US government is incented by us exchanging currency faster and faster, because if it does, it can increase GDP, increase its financial fortitude, and gain the trust of other countries to borrow money from, to gain allegiance from people in order for them to want to immigrate here, because it seems like we have a lot of more resources than we do. It's a game. And so this is sort of a deduction that maybe you can take away from today. One of the biggest signs of fear in America is related to self-defense, or the gun industry. Now, I just recently learned about this, and I was kind of unaware. But the gun ownership in the U.S. is quite perplex. Again, the U.S. population is about 340 million, right? Has doubled over the past 65 years. Today, there are almost 400 million guns in the U.S. 99% of that is owned by civilians, surprisingly, right? I would have thought it was not the case. About 99% is owned by civilians. The military owns about 1% of all the guns, about 4.5 million. And then the police or law enforcement own even smaller, a paltry number than that. It is about 1 million, about 1/4 of 1%. To put it in perspective, civilians own a $100 bill of guns, and in comparison, the police own 25 cents or a quarter in comparison, which is kind of staggering, because I think people are buying guns because they have an underlying fear to defend themselves against threats, right? When we boil this down, based on the population, we have over 1 gun per person, per man, woman, child, and we have almost 2 guns per adult. Not enough to double holster yet. We have 1.79, but I have to imagine as fear continues to multiply, so will the guns. So, not all hope is lost. There will be a time in our day where we have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 guns per person. But maybe then we'll be safer, right? So let's think about this a little bit further. Why was the Second Amendment created? And here's maybe a way to think about it, is that the early American colonizers used guns to defeat the British rule. And they used guns further to eliminate other threats, such as indigenous populations, such as other groups of people from other lands. And it was an effective way of clearing out the land for the early Americans to sort of conquer and take advantage of. But with those early American citizens who weren't necessarily in the military or in the government, those people's trust had to be gained. So a Second Amendment was created out of a fear of federal tyranny. What that means is, all right, I know you guys all saw us use guns to defeat these people. And all right, don't worry. We'll probably not use that against you guys too. Just trust us. But in the off chance that we ever do use military force against you, don't worry, because you guys can use your guns to defend against us. So it's, you guys can have trust. And, it's like, even if we do turn our back on you citizens, it's okay because you guys have a contingency. You are able to arm yourself and you are able to use your kind of crappy guns to go against us. And let's think about this in a further context where it's like, let's compare guns to the history of the iPhone. The iPhone and the smartphone is a kind of like a recent development in the human history, right? And the first iPhone, if I was to purchase the first iPhone as an early adopter, Apple took those proceeds and took it and invested into the next iPhone. And then they took those proceeds from the second iPhone sales and they sold it again and as a new improved product. And I said, I need a better iPhone for more computing power, for more, I got to turn my 3G to a 4G, or I got to, I want to play these Candy Crush games in 3D or whatever, So then I buy an iPhone 3, and then a 4, and then a 5, and it just keeps, the money from the previous creates the next, right? Creates the research and the development necessary to sell you a more sophisticated product. It's similar to guns. If I buy the first gun, it's probably not that good. It probably doesn't shoot straight. It might not even be that effective. And once I buy that gun from them, from a gun manufacturer or from a seller, they take that money and they invest it into the next gun. And the next gun, hey, it's a straight shooter. This thing works now. I feel more prepared to tackle on the imminent threats in my life. I can defend myself against a potential government tyranny, right? And guess what, though? The people who buy that gun, the straight shooter gun, they invest in another gun. And that gun now is an automatic. It shoots so many bullets in record speed, right? And now I'm even more equipped to defend. Now my fear is being quenched, or my thirst is being quenched. My fire is being extinguished because I bought this new and improved weapon, right? And once I buy the AR, then it goes into and invests into the AR with a silencer, right? And now no one will even hear it, right? And now it just, now they won't even know what's coming. They won't even know what hit them. It's silent, And the money from selling that gun or buying the gun goes into developing the next one. Now I have a gun that it doesn't even get fingerprints on it. Like the new iPhone 20, it doesn't even get fingerprints on it anymore, guys. It's a phone that is just so intelligent that it's like I can never even be found guilty if I use it. It's a whole nother sophisticated form of firearm. And what I'm trying to get at is that buying a gun does not buy your protection. It buys the future protection of the one who sold you the fear. Again, there is a reason why the military and the police only own a paltry, maybe 1.3, 4, 5%. They own less than 2% of the guns in the United States. You know why they own such a least amount? Because they know that with that amount of firearm and sophisticated military, it doesn't matter what gun you have in your home. You're not going to be able to defend yourself against a drone strike, against sophisticated firearm technology. And the crazy thing is, the more you buy guns, the more you are creating the proceeds for future research and development to kill you. And that's sort of this house of cards thing. It is the thing that you think you are protecting yourself with, but it is also the thing that will kill you, And we have such, sometimes it feels like we live in a crazy time because why are guns so proliferated? Why are they everywhere? And why does everyone feel like they need one? And it's like this interesting thing where it's like, you realize that you're just a pawn in it. You are a cog in the machine that is designed to make money off of your fear in order to control you. You know, he who draws the sword will die by the sword. He who uses fear will die by fear. You know, gun laws are usually only made by people who haven't been killed by one. I have to imagine that if we were to ask someone who was fatally shot by a gun, you know, I wonder what they would say about if they wish that guns were obsolete or never existed in the first place. I have to imagine that anyone who has ever been shot probably would have wished that guns never existed in the first place. But the problem is we can never get their side of the story or listen to their opinion anymore because they're not here to say it. You know, we only have the people who are here today trying to perpetuate fear, trying to perpetuate control, trying to perpetuate them and maximize the exchange of currency. Gotta go forward and not back, guys. All right. So now what? Kind of scared you guys, maybe? Right? You're like, why are you creating us more fear? And it's like, it's important to recognize that fear is probably the most effective way of control. But whenever it's braided and intertwined with greed, with profit motives, with control, vote for me or else the world will be doomed. It's perversely incented then. It has perverse intentions. It is used as a control tactic. And it is used to get you to disassociate yourself from your true nature. So what can we do? The first thing is to ask ourselves, where do influence, urgency, and anxiety intersect in my life? You know, where do I feel fear? And where do I create fear? Where do I cause other people to fear through imminent fear, through risk, through FOMO? A lot of people work in industries where they are selling things to create urgency and anxiety. And the only way for consumers to get rid of that urgency and anxiety is to buy something, to sell something, you know? And if this is the first thing, is to identify where it exists. You know, where am I feeling urgency? Where am I feeling anxiety? You know, and where are people trying to control my movements? You know, what I do. The next thing we can do is ask ourselves, which ones are most after profit and control? So if someone's trying to convince us to buy something, because ultimately, you know, you got to buy that water filtration system. Otherwise, you're going to get all those harmful chemicals in your water. You're going to get arsenic, and chloroform, and chlorophyll, and all the things. You know, it's like, it's going to kill you, you know? So you buy the water filtration system to limit your risk and protect your future, right? Or say I'm a politician and I basically create fear around the alternative candidate winning. If they win, you know what's going to happen. Your world is going to turn upside down. The world's going to be on fire. They don't understand how to run this country, and you already know it. You already see what happens whenever they do it. That's why I want you to vote for me. And so you create this world where it's like, we're never really creating the best solutions. We end up creating the lesser of two evils. And we are selling ourselves as far as, well, that side's more evil. I told you, you know, and the reality is that no one benefits more from a politician than a politician. You know, they are selling you to vote for them to give them a job that they can tell you about how great they did. And half of you will believe them and half of you won't, in order for them to live a very leisurely life. You know, and it's kind of perverse. So if people are doing this, they are leveraging fear to control you. So we need to identify these fears, identify the perverse intentions, call them out, and even so much as ask ourselves, am I profiting off of any of these fears? Am I creating imminent fear? Am I a doctor giving people cancer diagnoses, trying to convince them because I'm selling them chemo? You know, am I creating FOMO, you know, because I work at a marketing agency and I'm trying to maximize urgency and anxiety, you know, so that I can influence them the most, you know. Once we can be honest with ourselves about, you know, maybe I am causing more harm than I think I am. And maybe I'm part of the problem because the fear trickles down. If the CEO is trying to extract more workforce productivity out of me, I have to sell more fear to the consumer base in order for me to turn a profit, in order for me to take care of my family maybe, or to retire early, or to get what I want, whatever my insatiable desire happens to be. The final step that we can do is to minimize those fears. Turn them off if you have to. That means the news, social media. Try to find people that aren't trying to get you to change, especially when that change is mixed with profit or control, selfish control. There's one thing to be given a diagnosis, say you smoke cigarettes. I smoked cigarettes for almost 12 years, and thankfully I quit. But I have a grandmother who didn't quit. She smoked till the end. Fear can be this thing where it's like at 60 years old, 70 years old, when you get a cancer diagnosis, a lung cancer diagnosis, it can be an effective wake-up call to say, oh my God, I got to quit, otherwise I'm going to die soon. And you can feel that anxiety and urgency collect and sort of manifest itself into this sort of, I got to do something, otherwise I'm going to die here. And what's more important, another cigarette or another day, right? And the thing becomes is that fear can become a thing to create change, but oftentimes people will leverage it as a profit motive. It will become the last effective way for humans to generate profit. And that's what we are incented to do, right? And fear can be a good thing. It is a necessary human emotion too, to protect ourselves. But when it's mixed, it can be distorted, perverted, and the water is basically poisoned. So I'm not saying to turn off all fear. What I'm saying is turn off all the fear that makes money, and turn off all the fear that is trying to get you to think a particular way, to act a particular way, and to buy a particular thing or service. That is what is at stake here. And you have more agency than you realize, even though people are trying to convince you otherwise. Okay. In the end, and in most cases, for most problems, you will realize that prevention is the only solution. With fires, if we focus on the causes, maybe we'll never get burned. Maybe we'll be able to avoid that harm instead of trying to create contingencies once the harm hits. As the old adage goes, only you can prevent forest fires. I'm here to remind you that only you can prevent fear. Again, my name is Jared. This has been my Jared Talk. Thank you for listening if you made it this far, and thank you for your attention. Before I let you go, I'd like to just iterate that I am not trying to profit off of this. This video will not be monetized in any way. I do not care about money, okay? Or I'm trying my best not to, especially with things revolving around teaching or trying to share ideas. You realize that you can only tell the truth. Anyone who is selling you something is trying to sell you the truth, but it isn't the truth. The truth is free. And that's a good litmus test for determining what is true and what is untrue. And what I want to leave you with is that if you feel inspired from this sort of lecture, or however you want to look at it, if you are inspired at all from this time, from these insights, I encourage you to practice love a little bit more today. And what I mean by that is I've been thinking that more and more that love is only love when it's inconvenient. And that love is an empty word unless we internalize pain without causing any. I think in my time on this earth, I have said and heard, I love you, more than I have practiced it and made other people feel loved. And I just want to encourage you that the strongest tool in your toolbox is to make someone feel considered. And what I mean by that is just resist saying it and make people feel it. And if you're wondering, like, well, how can I do that? Easy way. If you, in America, you're going to encounter homeless people, I want you to make eye contact with them. Look them dead in the eye. You don't have to give them anything, but see them. Recognize that there is need around you, outside of your bubble. If you live close to a bus stop, even if you don't use public transportation, go sit at a bus stop and talk to someone. Let someone else feel heard that you would have never met otherwise, even if it means it's inconvenient. Inconvenience is where love is. Everything else is transactional. If I trade love with you because you're going to love me, if I buy you a gift because you're going to get me a gift, it's not love. It's transacting. Love is whenever I take your pain away without causing you any. And so if we do these things, if we look after our neighbors, if we connect with someone we've sort of lost contact with, if we check in, and we show concern, we let people feel heard. If we do these things, we can reverse the damage of fear that we have created and felt, and remind ourselves that it isn't over yet. We still have time to change course. And it is really the only tool in our lifetime to really make a difference. So if this message was inspiring to you today, I'd encourage you to practice love quickly. Don't think about it. Don't let your mind get in the way of your heart, and do it urgently, as much as fear wants us to feel urgent. It's our only way to unwind and try to repair and heal the damage. All right. This has been Jared Talk with Jared. Have a good one. Thank you for your time. Ciao for now. Peace.